of at least 50 freedom seekers. We know their names, we know when they moved, we know their travels through the state of Illinois. And then we really also, just very briefly on this outline, just to give you a sense, and I could go on for an hour about this, but to give you a sense about it, recognize that before 1820 there were always freedom seekers. You know, from the beginning of slavery there were people who were seeking their freedom. You know, this was not a new thing. You know, from day one, if people were enslaved, they wanted to be free. In Illinois, from 1820 to about 1836, it really was freedom seekers acting on their own. People coming out of the South, or coming out of Missouri, and really acting on their own. Then we've got plenty of newspaper notices about this kind of activity. There's a wonderful set of stories about a character named Black Bob, and who settled in the area of kind of western Will County and going west from there. And the short part of the story is that essentially the first permanent non-native settler in the southwest area of Chicago, the Chicago region, you know, kind of, you know, the whole business with DeSable, you know, the first white man in Chicago was a black man. Well, the first permanent white man in the southwest arena, in the southern part of our region, was a black man, Black Bob. And the whites successfully came in because they were assisted by Black Bob. Really exciting stories. Toni had alluded to Free Frank and Lucy. And there are just a whole range of stories about freedom seekers acting on their own. About 1837 is when the anti-slavery societies and the real initiation of the Underground Railroad happens. And there's the remarkable story of Carolyn Quarles. And just to say, in 1842, this young woman, Carolyn Quarles, 16 years old, escapes from St. Louis, ends up in Milwaukee. And the abolitionists in Milwaukee knew in 1842 that the best network for assisting freedom seekers was in the region south of Chicago. Right? Our region was the most organized for helping fugitive slaves. And the folks in Milwaukee knew that, and so one of the things they did was they sent Carolyn Quarles down to come right through our region, and we know the farms and the places that she stayed coming across the south suburbs. And I am now working a wonderful, delightful woman in Michigan who is Carolyn's great-great-great-great-granddaughter, and we're writing a book about her remarkable story. And we've got a chapter that's coming out in another book this spring. But it's just incredible. But the thing for us to know is our region is where people in the Midwest knew they've got to get, if they want to be most effective, they get to our region. Then, as I point out here, after 1845, there not only is the things really shift. You have the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. You've got the incoming of the railroads, but also in terms of our stories, there is this asserting of black leadership, which is very important. Now, real briefly, if you turn to page 2, and if anybody ever says to you, well, gee, did things go on in the Chicago region assisting fugitive slaves? And the white diamonds all represent places where I feel very comfortable with that we have the documentation that these are places where freedom seekers were involved and traveled through. And the circles are places that are pretty likely. And on both sides of the map, I've got the list of towns. So there's a lot of stuff we could talk about, but I want you to know there is a tremendous amount of activity, a tremendous amount of information. And then I was working with some folks a year or two ago, and I thought I'd throw it in for the heck of it. On the back, someday at near the intersection of Cal-Sag and Indiana Avenue, I hope we have a sign that looks something like this. It's on the back of this thing. That, you know, I'm hoping that we have essentially a series of historic markers around. And then for those of you that are interested in a lot more detail, I have established a website trying to be a guide to getting people to a lot of these resources that are online, and the reference to that is there. So, and it's really exciting to hear what Paul and Toni have been up to, and
how about that?
Be part of that. So, this is what I've been up to.
getting together like this every year?
Well, one comment, because I think history is dying out faster than we can record it sometimes. We're trying to find the sources, you know, people who have connections. And a member of our historical society who died about a year ago in her 80s, Ora Coons, maiden name was Matthews. She used to talk about going to her uncle's farm, that it had been a link on the Underground Railroad. And I don't know if that family has it. Rod, do you know, is there any history in the family that her daughter has carried with? We don't have any in the museum at all. Okay, but there are links there that might still be alive in the family that might be worth checking into.
Well, thank God for the digital world that saved all of us from going from shrine to shrine. Now we're at our thing. Who's got the time to?
What about Secure as an active organization now? It was a member of CSI, but we haven't. The website seems to be non-existent anymore. Is it active today? Is it a functioning organization?
No.
It's been a couple of years.
I was president for 4 or 5 years, then it assumed a different focus, and I had babies to raise, and you know.
So it's a
mom was a more important job than running a no-profit.
So Secure isn't there anymore then?
No, but it's still a good acronym, and there's no reason not to use it. And I do like Crossroads to Freedom. I think it's pretty broad.
Well, Paul, maybe we could figure out how to revive it.
Naomi and CQ, they were talking about building a museum across the street from a garbage now. It's missing, leaking, and God knows what else. So that was my problem. I mean, I think it's a beautiful site in principle, but in reality, I wouldn't go there every day. Okay, I wouldn't fish out of there. I wouldn't drink any water. I don't even
it was
want to
the last
touch
spot in
anything.
Chicago to get
It's
water.
just horrible. It's just horrible. And they got cancer clusters over there. So I think it was not that people didn't support it in theory. It's just that the reality of it is that area
The
is
physical
probably
reality of the site is a mess.
it's highly toxic, and you know it's questionable whether it's inhabitable at all. I mean,
Well, there are bad people doing bad things with big dogs and no light and no numbers on their houses. It's a frightening area.
Yeah, but I mentioned again, it's toxic. I mean, they're making U.S. Steel dredge that whole area. I mean, it's
nearby it's true.
Yeah.
So let's, now this conversation is going to continue on the Chicago
There's
side.
a round table right there for a second.
And,
Here we go.
and so we'll continue that, but first we have to eat. So if there are 4 pizzas in the room just to the east.
Illinois or Indiana pizzas?
Yeah.